Today is December 18th, 1944. Your boots are soaked through. You've been standing in this foxhole for 11 hours. The water is 4 inches deep at the bottom, and it's been there since yesterday. You can't feel your toes anymore. That scares you more than the German artillery that's been pounding the ridge since dawn. You're 20 years old. 3 months ago, you were eating your mom's pot roast in Ohio. Today, you're freezing to death in a Belgian forest, and Christmas is a week away. Your wool uniform is frozen stiff. The field jacket they issued you back in England, it's designed for autumn rain. Not this. Not temperatures that drop to 0 at night. Not snow that falls so fast it buries your rifle if you set it down for 10 minutes. The supply trucks were supposed to bring winter gear 3 days ago. They didn't come. Nobody knows when they will. So you do what every other GI in the Ardennes is doing right now. You survive. You improvise. You take blankets off the dead. You wrap your feet in whatever fabric you can find. You use grenades to break the frozen ground when you need to dig deeper. This is the Battle of the Bulge. And the enemy isn't just the Wehrmacht. It's winter itself. You weren't supposed to be here. Early December. You're pulled off the line after 3 straight months of combat. The 28th Division has been chewed up in the Hurtgen Forest. 6,000 casualties in a month of pure hell. They tell you you're being sent to a quiet sector to rest. The Ardennes. Beautiful rolling hills covered in dense forest. The locals call it the Switzerland of Belgium. Command calls it unlikely terrain for a German attack. The roads are too narrow, the forest too thick. Nobody in their right mind would try to push an armored offensive through here. So you relax, sort of. Your company is stretched thin, 30 miles of front with barely enough men to watch the crossroads. But it's December. Everyone knows the war's almost over. Patton's racing toward Berlin. The Russians are coming from the east. Hitler's finished. You write letters home. You play cards. You huddle around fires at night, trying to remember what warmth feels like. The temperature drops. Mid-December brings the kind of cold that makes your breath hang in the air like smoke. You mention it to your sergeant. He shrugs. Winter gear's coming, he says. Be here in a few days. It's not a lie. Not really. The gear exists. It's in warehouses in England, in supply depots in France, but it's not here. And nobody seems too concerned because this is supposed to be a quiet sector, and the war's almost over, and surely to God, they won't need to fight in this cold. On the morning of December 16th, at 5:30 a.m., the Germans prove everyone wrong. The artillery comes first. You're asleep in a barn when the world explodes. Not a few shells, hundreds, maybe thousands. The heaviest bombardment American troops had encountered since Normandy. The sound is so loud, it doesn't register as sound anymore. It's just pressure. Your ears stop working. Your chest vibrates. You grab your rifle and run outside. It's still dark. The forest is lit up in orange flashes, trees snapping like matchsticks, dirt geysering into the air. And then, through the smoke and snow, you see them. Tanks, German tanks, rolling through the fog like ghosts. Infantry behind them, thousands of them. SS units in white winter camouflage that makes them disappear into the snow. You weren't ready for this. Nobody was. Within hours, the German advance punches through the American lines. Entire companies are surrounded. Others fall back in chaos, abandoning their positions, their equipment, their wounded. The roads become clogged with retreating soldiers, vehicles, panicked Belgian civilians fleeing west. And the cold. The cold is everywhere now. Freezing temperatures froze the water in canteens and hardened the ground to the point that men had to use grenades to dig their foxholes. Your rifle jams. The bolt freezes mid-action. You watch a guy next to you try to fix his machine gun. The metal is so cold, it burns his hands when he touches it. Someone yells that you should piss on the bolt to thaw it out. It works. That's the level you're at now. You find a foxhole. You dig in, and you realize something terrible. Your boots, leather-soled footwear, absorb snowmelt. Within an hour, your socks are soaked. Within 2 hours, you can't feel your feet. Your toes go numb. Then they start to hurt. Then they don't feel like part of your body anymore. This is how it starts. Trench foot, frostbite, the invisible enemy. And that's how you got here. To this foxhole. To December 18th. To this moment where you can't remember what warmth feels like. By the 3rd day, survival becomes an art. Heavy winter boots were scarce, and men slept atop their thin-skinned leather combat boots to to keep them from icing over. You learn quickly. If you take your boots off, they freeze solid by morning, so you sleep with them on, or you don't sleep at all. You regularly remove your socks to rub your feet. Your buddy does it too. You check each other's toes for the telltale white patches that mean frostbite is setting in. If you catch it early, rubbing blood back into the tissue might save them. If you don't, those toes are gone. The gear you don't have, you make. Blankets become makeshift insulation. Scarves sewn from sandbags protect faces from wind. You find a dead German soldier, frozen stiff in his foxhole, and you take his coat. It's warmer than yours. You feel bad about it for maybe 10 seconds. Then you stop feeling bad and start feeling warmer. Men wrap themselves in wool blankets and huddle around fires. But fires are dangerous. They give away your position. German artillery zeroes in on the smoke, so you make small fires, quick fires, just enough to thaw your rations. The food is frozen solid. Sea rations that are supposed to be eaten cold become blocks of ice. You have to thaw them over open flames before you can eat them. Sometimes you're too exhausted to bother. You just gnaw on frozen hash. It tastes like metal and despair. Water is the same problem. Your canteen freezes. The streams freeze. You melt snow in your helmet, but the meltwater is barely above freezing when you drink it. It drops your core temperature even more. You learn to move. Constantly. Standing still means freezing. So you shift your weight. You do jumping jacks in your foxhole when the shelling stops. Your sergeant makes everyone do it in shifts. 10 minutes of movement to get blood flowing, then back to watching the tree line for German infantry. But it's not enough. It's never enough. More than 15,000 cold injuries, trench foot, pneumonia, frostbite, were reported that winter. You see it happen. The guy next to you, good kid from Buffalo, always talking about how he grew up in snow. He stops taking off his boots. Says it's too cold, too much trouble. 3 days later, the medics pull him out of the line. His feet are black, swollen, the skin is splitting. He doesn't come back. Scores lose blackened toes, and even whole feet to frostbite and trench foot. The field hospitals fill up, faster than from combat wounds, faster than from German bullets. The cold is more efficient than artillery. Trench foot was more common than combat wounds during the Bulge. That's the sentence that haunts you. More men are taken out by the weather than by the enemy. You didn't sign up to fight winter. You signed up to fight Nazis. But here you are. The medics do what they can. They inspect feet constantly. They order you to change your socks. But where are you supposed to get dry socks? The supply trucks still haven't made it through. The roads are clogged. The Germans have cut off half the supply lines. Plasma freezes. Morphine syrettes stop working. A guy gets hit by shrapnel. Not a fatal wound, something that should be treatable. But he goes into shock from the cold before the medics can stabilize him. He dies shivering. You start to understand something. The cold doesn't just hurt, it breaks you mentally. Physically, you can push through pain. You've done it before, but the cold is different. It's constant, it's everywhere. You can't escape it. There's no safe rear area where it's warm. There's no heated tent. There's just the cold and the snow and the wind that cuts through every layer you've managed to scavenge. Warren Spahn, Baseball Hall of Famer and World War II veteran, said, "I was from Buffalo. I thought I knew cold, but I didn't really know cold until the Battle of the Bulge." And he's right. This isn't the cold of a harsh winter back home. This is the cold of war, where you can't go inside, where there is no inside. The officers don't get it. Not really. You hear stories from guys who were sent back to battalion headquarters for new orders. They describe it like it's a different war. Heated buildings, hot coffee, dry uniforms, officers standing around maps, moving pins, planning strategies. They don't understand what it's like out here. They don't understand that you can't advance when your feet are frozen. They don't understand that you can't hold a position when hypothermia is shutting down your brain. They don't understand that the fancy winter gear they ordered 3 weeks ago is still sitting in some depot 200 miles west. While you're wrapping your feet in burlap sacks you cut off of sandbags. There's a bitterness that settles in, not directed at the Germans, directed at the system, at the supply officers who prioritized ammunition over coats, at the commanders who thought the war would be over by Christmas and didn't plan for winter. One guy says it out loud. They're warm. We're not. That's the whole goddamn war right there. But you keep fighting. Not because you're brave, not because you believe in the mission anymore. You fight because the guys next to you are fighting. You fight because if you stop, you'll freeze. You fight because surrendering to the Germans means going to a POW camp, and you've heard what happens there. You'll freeze anyway. So you dig in. You hold the line. You wait for Patton's Third Army to break through from the south. Christmas comes. You're fighting on Christmas Day, 1944. There's no truce, no ceasefire. Just more shelling, more snow, more frozen men trying not to die. The weather breaks briefly on December 23rd. The fog lifts. The Allied air forces attack, launching devastating bombing raids on German supply points. P-47 Thunderbolts start attacking German troops on the roads. For the first time in a week, you feel like maybe, just maybe, you're not alone out here. Allied air forces drop much-needed supplies, medicine, food, blankets, and ammunition into Bastogne. The 101st Airborne, surrounded and cut off, finally gets relief. You get nothing. Your sector isn't surrounded. You're just forgotten. Low priority. But Patton's Third Army is pushing north. Patton's Third Army, known for its speed, averages roughly 1 mile a day. That's how bad the conditions are. That's how slow everything moves when the ground is frozen and the snow is 3 feet deep. You keep waiting. Keep surviving. January arrives. The German offensive stalls. They're out of fuel, out of men, out of time. The bulge they punched into Allied lines starts to collapse. You begin to push forward, slowly, taking back the ground you lost in December. The cold doesn't stop. If anything, it gets worse. Temperatures sometimes drop below -28 Celsius at night. But now you have winter gear. Finally, 6 weeks too late, but it's here. Heavy coats, insulated boots, dry socks by the dozen. You put them on and realize how close you came to losing everything. By the end of January, the Battle of the Bulge is over. The casualties are staggering. Almost 20,000 Americans killed, another 47,000 wounded, 23,000 missing or captured. The largest and bloodiest single battle the United States fought in World War II. But those numbers don't tell the full story. The 99th Infantry Division lost about 20% of its effective strength, including 465 killed and 2,524 evacuated due to wounds, injuries, fatigue, or trench foot, not bullets, not bombs. The cold. You think about the guys who didn't make it, the ones who were pulled out with blackened feet, the ones who died of hypothermia in their foxholes, the ones who just gave up, who stopped moving, stopped fighting, stopped trying to stay warm. And you think about the ones who did make it, who improvised, who stole coats off the dead, who kept their feet dry by sleeping on top of their boots, who survived because they refused to quit. It changes you. You don't talk about it much when you get home. What's there to say? That you spent 6 weeks freezing in Belgium? That you lost 3 toes to frostbite but kept fighting anyway? That the war wasn't just bullets and tanks. It was wool socks and frozen canteens and the daily battle not to lose your feet. Nobody understands unless they were there. The Battle of the Bulge is remembered for tanks and paratroopers, for McAuliffe's reply of nuts to the German surrender demand, for Patton's Third Army racing to the rescue, but for the men who fought in the foxholes, who stood watch in the frozen forests, who dug in along the ridgelines and held the line when everything was collapsing. For them, the battle was about something simpler. It was about cold. They were attacking in the middle of the worst snowstorm Central Europe had seen in 2 decades. They were doing it without proper gear, without winter coats or insulated boots, without anything except the determination to survive 1 more hour, 1 more night, 1 more frozen dawn. Soldiers repaired gear with scavenged German parts and improvised insulation using anything they could find. They adapted. They endured. They won. When your grandkids complain about the cold, you look at them with that 1,000-yard stare they don't understand. You think about the Ardennes, about the foxholes and the frostbite, and the friends who didn't make it home. And you say, "You think this is cold? Let me tell you about the winter I spent in Belgium." You trail off. Because how do you explain it? How do you explain what it's like to fight 2 wars at once? One against the enemy in front of you, and one against the enemy all around you. You can't. So you don't. You just remember. The weight of frozen boots, the ache of numb fingers gripping a rifle, the sound of wind howling through bare trees, the sight of breath hanging in the air like ghosts. You remember it all, and you carry it with you, like a scar that never quite fades. We survived the bulge, not because we were heroes, not because we were brave, but because we refused to let the cold win. And in the end, that was enough.